day made them feel. And that's branding. Branding is emotion.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Super excited today. We've got Steph Weber. She is a marketing and branding powerhouse in the short-term rental and boutique hotel space. She's the CEO and founder of Weber Company, a branding and marketing agency, has helped over 100 small businesses scale into 6- and 7-figure brands. The strong focus today on vacation rentals and micro resorts and destination properties. She not only talks about branding, but she does it herself. They've been in the middle of developing their own micro resort. Super excited to hear about this with the cabins on the Cumberland, a 12-unit cabin micro resort and event venue. In parallel, Steph and Colin, her husband, has built a 6-figure co-hosting company in just 1 year. They're doing stuff all over the place. And in addition, Steph has 2 boys and is an amazing person to follow on social media. Always super authentic and fun in her posts. So Steph, welcome to the Radical Hospitality Podcast.
Zeke, thanks for the intro. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited. So you got a chance to meet my redheaded wife. And if you guys who aren't watching, has beautiful bright red hair and has the same kind of energy. So I'm excited to have a chat with you today. So Steph, why don't you give us a little background? How did you begin your journey from branding to hospitality?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I'm going to take you back a little bit further, Zeke, just so everybody has an understanding, but I'll try to be quick about this. So I started working for a boutique when I was 17, and they are just a small boutique here in Indianapolis, and they were in their infancy, like literally a year old, and they needed branding. They needed marketing support. I went to school for branding and marketing, and then I worked for them after for a period of time. And that fashion industry was really great, and I loved everything I was doing. But while I was in that, we started working with influencers, and I was like, hang on a minute, we're paying someone and sending them free clothes to promote our brand, and this feels like something I should do. So I created the brand Trendy and Indie, and I did that from 2016 to about 2018. And in 2018, Zeke, I was sitting at New York Fashion Week, which was like a big dream, a big bucket list item. And I was like, this is so cool, but I think I'm meant to help brands a little bit differently. And the question that I would ask all of these different partners that I had the opportunity to work with, I mean, I worked with some really amazing hotel brands like the Andaz in Napa Valley and on Wall Street, and 25 Hours hotels over in Europe, and the Lark Hotel Group out. And they have multiple locations, but I stayed at their one out in Nantucket. And I would always ask the partners that I was supporting as an influencer, like, what makes your brand unique? What makes you stand out? Tell me about your story. And I was met with these sort of like halfway put together answers. And I was like, okay, this is a problem that I know that I can solve much more powerfully than I'm doing right now as an influencer. And so in 2019, I pivoted the Weber Co. to be branding and marketing, coaching and consulting for small businesses and entrepreneurs of any niche. Like if you wanted to work with me, you could work with me at that time. And it was really great. And we had a 12-month coaching program. We launched our marketing agency, learned a lot, learned what clients I really love supporting and what clients I was like, I don't think I want to do that industry again. Like this doesn't excite me. And then in 2023, we decided to get into the world of short-term rentals. Investing and being in short-term rentals was something my husband and I have talked about for a while. We're high school sweethearts, so we've been together now longer, like half of our lives, right? It's kind of crazy to think about. I can't even imagine life without him, but we talked about it. And so I was like, 2023, like this is our year. I was 8 months pregnant with our second baby. We had our toddler at home, and I was like, let's buy another house. And he was like, you're nuts. And we did it. So we invested in our first short-term rental here in Indianapolis, where we currently live. We also got into co-hosting at that time. I have a friend who has properties out in Colorado, and she was like, have you heard about co-hosting? I really think you guys should explore that. Like with your background, I think this could be good for you. So we started our co-hosting business at the same time that we bought this property. I was literally in labor in the hospital, and our real estate agent was connecting me to who would become our first co-hosting client. And I was like, I'm having a baby, but like, I'll reach back out to you in 5 days. Give me 5 days and we'll be good. And at that time, I shared on Instagram what our big vision was. I was like, we want to have this piece of land somewhere where we can have multiple units and we can do weddings and events and retreats, like the ultimate kind of summer camp vibes for adults, maybe, but also like a family friendly area. I was like, I don't know. I just want something that's like in nature, multiple units. Well, 7 weeks later, that opportunity presented itself to us. So it was this 9-acre piece of land right on the Cumberland River, close to Lake Cumberland. We're about 25 minutes away from the lake. And at this point, my husband really thinks I've lost my mind. We have a newborn. We have a new business. I've decided I was going to pivot the Weber Co. into the world of short term rentals and boutique hotels and hospitality. And he's like, and now you want to spend over $2 million where I have no idea where that's going to come from to buy a 12 cabin micro resort? Like, what are you doing? So we figured it out. Obviously, we've been working on it since August of 2023, but that is kind of the short and quick version of how we got into this industry, and now our whole life revolves around hospitality, which is very fun.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, Steph. So you definitely have a lot to keep a hold of there.
Yeah, yeah, I know a lot of moving parts, right?
I
Always.
don't, I don't, I think one of the reasons I really enjoy like you and your husband, again, just watching from afar is we relate so much. So Amy, who you met, her and I also were that wild high school sweetheart and we eloped at 19. So we just did our 25th and every step of the journey, I won't spill it on this podcast, has been, some sort of, wild, let's do this left, right thing. And so I totally understand, the
I
need to
love
run
that.
5 businesses and, raise kids and, do it while you're renovating the house that you're trying to have a baby in. So well done.
Crazy, crazy, craziness.
Yeah, super fun. And the string, so a lot to unpack there. And we'll start like working through some of that. Maybe let's come back to, that early part of your story there. The string of how design starts to move through and influence the different things that you're doing. Because I think that is like a great base, and for entrepreneurs, it's kind of like learning English. You can use it in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be one thing. So you did clothing, and then you begin to do branding, and then you begin to do short-term rentals, and to maybe the outside world that looks like 3 different things. But I think there's probably a string through that you're using that like same creative skill to create new things. So how do you view design in the work that you've done, and how has it led from one to the next?
Yeah, I think that, well, the way in which I view this is maybe a few different things, Zeke. So, number one, I think from a fashion industry perspective, everything I was doing in that industry was incredibly creative, but also very story based. And I just really had an understanding of what branding meant and what it meant to build a story and what it meant to help people, your target audience, connect to that story. And so that's what I was doing in the fashion industry for the company I was working for. And then I was like, I can do this through my own brand for other brands. Then I can teach others how to do this and how to do it really well. And then I can bring this energy into the world of short-term rentals. And I think that's something that in the world of short-term rentals and boutique hotels, etc., something that we maybe forgot about in the years of like 2020, 2021, 2022 even was like the gold mine, right? I wasn't in it in that time, but I've heard stories and it's like the property's on Airbnb, everything's pumping, we're cash flowing like crazy. It's awesome. I just have to have like kind of decent design and some good amenities, and it's going to be fantastic. And 2023 hit, and I think this industry really started to see a change and started to see a shift. And in 2025, we saw some massive changes from some of these platforms. And I think the big lesson and like the design piece of this is that it's always so important to own your brand and have brand ownership and not rely on others to build it for you, which I think is something that we see so often again in like short-term rentals and boutique hotels and micro resorts. We're letting these other platforms use their brands and maybe help us with visibility, but they're winning the loyalty. They're winning the guest. So for us and for what we teach and what we do, it comes back to really having ownership over your brand. And when you do that too, a lot of us are entrepreneurs and we got into this because we saw a different path and we saw a different way of life that we wanted to have. And this year, I think we'll see a big movement into, in this industry specifically, building out personal brands and sharing our journey and sharing the story that helps our audience connect, and then also helps open doors for us to other projects, right? Where most of us are these kind of like interesting creatives, and we're willing to share our stories, and we're inviting others to be a part of that. And we're doing the same thing when we invite a guest to come experience our properties, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this year shifts and changes. But that's kind of like the maybe some of the common threads. It really comes back to story, comes back to inviting others to be a part of the journey.
I love that. And you hear a lot about storytelling, but it's one thing to kind of hear about it. Maybe kind of break that down for us. How do we actually do that well if we're, a hospitality investor, developer, and want to also promote, the projects, the things that we're doing? How do you do that well across your platforms that actually have a good return on investment? And what does that look like when I'm telling a story through whether it's social media or uh, personal connections?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use a couple of tangible examples here for the audience seek. So I'll use Cabins on the Cumberland, but I also want to talk about one of our recent projects that we did for one of our clients, because it's the power of story, and this one is just so good. First and foremost, for these hospitality based projects, when we're building a micro resort, we're building a hotel, or we're creating a new short term rental, or whatever it might be, we have a guest in mind who we are designing this space for. And we're really, if we're really clear about that, they're not just coming to us because they think that we have a well-designed property. Like, they're not using that terminology. They're not like, oh, well, that room was really well designed. They're talking about how their stay made them feel. And that's branding. Branding is emotion. And if we can make the connection between this product that we have to offer, the rooms that we're selling or whatever, and how they're making someone feel, there's secret sauce and like that special spot in there with branding and with brand story. And that's what we have to share. And that's what we have to tell in order to engage the audience, right? And also, in order for them to trust us, then we use our personal brand and our personal story and weave that into this as well. And I think that's the advantage that all of us in this like boutique hotel, micro resort, short term rental industry have an advantage of over some of these like larger hotel brands. We are personal, and we're doing this for a reason. So, using Cabins on the Cumberland as an example, when we started that project, we had to get really clear about who we were designing for and who the target audience was. So, we knew, Zeke, that this was not going to be a luxury property. We knew that we were not designing a like luxury wellness couples getaway, which has been like in very simple terms, kind of like common theme. We knew that we were creating a very family oriented micro resort with an experience that is one of a kind in this specific market, which attracts 4 million people a year. Lake Cumberland is a massive lake, and it attracts about 4 million people a year. And we're right on the Cumberland River. So we also knew that we were going to be attracting anglers, people who love to fish, families who love to fish. And I can't tell you the number of guests that send us photos of their kids catching their first fish. And I'm like, you're living out exactly who we designed this brand for. And that's what's really cool about it. Everything we did for Cabins on the Cumberland started first and foremost by identifying that target audience. And they are called the McCarthy family. We have a whole story around them and how they operate in their lives. And mom and dad are both working, and the kids are going this direction and that direction. And the only real time that they may have together is a few minutes at the end of the night, where everyone's still like on their devices and connected to all of the other things. We wanted to create a space at Cabins on the Cumberland where these families could come together and remember what it means to be a family unit and create new traditions. And so our tagline for Cabins on the Cumberland is family traditions start here. And that wording was very intentional. So notice you didn't hear me say like, we're a cabin community for families. I said family traditions start here. And there's so much difference in the power of that language, right? You feel that a little bit differently. And so that's the power of storytelling and branding at the, I'm going to say, the like product level. So the cabins level, the micro resort level. The other side of this is that I've used my personal brand to bring people along for the journey of Cabins on the Cumberland. And I've largely like shared that journey on via the Weber Co. and have talked about the hardships that we've experienced and why we've made certain decisions that we have and why we decided to go back to the bank and ask for funding for our game center and so forth. So I've shared this whole journey. And what was so cool, we were down there in, I think it was September when we were down there for our final photo shoot. And I had a follower on Instagram who messaged me and she said, I've been following you for years and we're down here. Like, we're staying here at the same time that you're here. And I was like, that's so cool, but also speaks volumes to the power of personal branding that supports then the businesses that we're building and that hospitality experience too. So that side of things has very much been about just let me be authentic and share with you what we're doing and what we're building and what we set out to do, and I'll bring you along for that. And we may epically fail. I don't think we have, but if we may epically fail, but you're going to be here for that too, right? And so those kind of two pieces working really well together to share the story. When we're sharing from Cabins on the Cumberland and we're creating content, we're keeping the McCarthy family in mind. And we want to make sure that the content that we're creating and sharing speaks directly to them and allows them to feel like Cabins on the Cumberland is my place. Like, this is going to be our family's place. This is going to be the place where our kids want to bring their kids to 15 years from now when they're all grown up and they have their own families. We're going to come back here. And that's what we're really working to instill. So that's the story we tell.
Love it. Love it. It's so I mentioned we're in the middle of building Red Hotel. We're starting to build this brand. And, we've been starting through some of these exercises of, who is that ideal client? What do they look like? And it's good to hear you talk through, okay, I'm seeing this like develop as some story, some branding colors, some logo, and then thinking about, next steps, how do I actually take and utilize that through our messaging? Once they kind of hand it over, are you coaching your clients along? Are you handing this over? How do you transition that from like, here's your logo to here's a story that you're attracting
Yes.
people to?
Yeah, great question, Zeke. So the process really is, I always tell our clients, I was just telling someone this morning. I was like, I view the Weber Co agency as your partner, your brand strategy partner, right? And we want to be aligned in what your vision is, and we want to help you carry that out and bring it to life. And that starts with first identifying, yes, the target audience, but not just one specific target audience. You're probably going to have multiple audiences, right? I talked about the McCarthy family, which is sort of our like North Star or core audience for our stays. But we also host weddings, we host retreats, we host church retreats. And so we also have to keep those audiences in mind too. So we do that work. And then we move into core messaging. And we actually do this, Zeke. And I think this is the number one misconception with branding. We hear brand and we think fonts, logos, colors. Like, we immediately think visuals. And before we ever even do visuals, we're doing all of the messaging strategy, because the visuals have to be representative of how we want to make people feel. And that's honestly one of the best branding questions that you can ask is, how do we want guests to feel when they have an experience with us? And it's not just about the in-person physical experience that your guest is going to have when they're staying. It's how do we want our guests to feel from the very first touch point? How do we want to be perceived? What do we want them to say about us? What words or phrases are they using to describe their experience with us? And then how do we weave that into all of our core messaging? And then where does it live? And so that's what we do first, is like all of the core messaging, where all of this messaging needs to live, from like your email signature line to the first guest message to your Instagram bio. Where does it all need to live? And then we move into those visual components. And that is more of a I'm going to say like a brand visual suite. It's not just one primary logo and maybe your submark. It is multiple different logo variations that you're going to use depending upon where you're putting those logos. It's your icons that are helping to tell the story. It's the brand patterns. Of course, it's the colors and the fonts, yes. And then it's going, how do you activate this? What does this look like on the sign of our hotel? What does this look like when we are posting on social? What does our Instagram profile photo actually need to look like? If we're right now for Cabins on the Cumberland, we're getting ready to do 2 bridal shows and 2 boat sport and travel shows. So these like very in-person experiences that we're going to have with our potential guests. What do we want them to feel based on what we're handing out? So we've created various different merchandise and swag and brand materials to be able to hand out. And that's like the visual representation of the feeling that the brand has, right? So that's a little bit kind of overview of the process.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people wear different, multiple hats. And sometimes you may have some of these skills internally. Sometimes you may have to bring a partnership in. What are the branding hats that are important to have in place for, this branding suite team? You talk about social, PR, web, how much of that should be, what are those specific hats and team members that you need to do appropriate, if we're looking at a boutique hotel marketing campaign?
Love that you're asking this question because I think marketing is one of the most undervalued and under leveraged components of launching a new hotel. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that's sad, but it's just one of those things that, like, when the budget is tight, and believe me, I know this. We've been building a micro resort now for 2 years. Like, I get it, I really do. But having ownership of our brand and knowing that we were still doing direct bookings while under construction. In fact, we stay 30 to 50% direct booked every single month. And also, we're continuing to build our audience is so core to, at some point in time, because all of you who are listening to this who are investors have an exit plan. You're not like, let's buy these properties and hang on to them for the rest of our lives. Some cases, sure, maybe they're like your legacy properties, and that's fine. But at some point, you want to exit. Well, if you don't have your own brand, and you don't have your own guest list, and you're selling a business asset, part of the business asset is having those email lists, having your social media handles, having your Google business profile with all of the reviews, right? And that's all part of branding. So the way I like to explain this, Zeke, is think of brand strategy like this. If you were to go build a home without laying the foundation and you were like, let's just like start putting up some walls and see if we can put the roof on, what's going to happen? It's going to fall, right? It's going to fall down. And this is what I see so often with marketing. It's like, let's go like throw out this email campaign. Let's go post something on social media. Let's like boost a post or run an ad or something without having the brand strategy dialed in. Your marketing is going to be very challenging and you are not going to see the results that you want to see. So really understanding in terms of what the team looks like, it comes back to what's the strategy that needs to be implemented, and then who are the key players that can execute that strategy. And in some cases, Zeke, like that can be VAs as long as they're supported by really fantastic strategy, or it could be an in-house marketing team. Certainly it could be an agency, but the bottom line is that you have to have marketing as part of your budget. It cannot be a, if we have room in the budget, like sure, maybe. But the number of times I hear we don't have a marketing budget or we don't have that in our budget, I'm just like, then what I feel like you're saying in that is I don't have enough money to be able to support my business financially. That's how it feels because marketing is an essential component. I'm not saying you need to donate or dedicate 50% of your budget to marketing by any means, but be realistic, right? And make sure that you're not neglecting it and do it from the very beginning, right? Like I am so glad that we started the Cabins on the Cumberland Instagram account before we ever even had cabins for guests to come and stay in. I'm so glad we started list building before I had cabins ready to launch, because when I did, I sent out an email to our list that we had started collecting, and we had direct bookings right away because we were prepared and we had those systems in place in order to engage those guests, and they'd been following, so they knew the story, they knew the journey, they were like excited. Even though we were under construction, there was like an orange porta potty on this 9-acre piece of land and so many of my photos, which kills my soul, but for such a long time. But they were like, this is great, we love it, we love the experience, we can't wait to come back. That's really cool.
Love it. Well, I want to hear more about the experience of Cumberland on the Cumberland and what that looked like to actually raise capital, put together the deal, construction, design, timeline. So maybe, let's hop into that a little bit because that's a whole another long journey. I know as an architect of what that takes to put together. So what was it
Yeah.
like
Yes,
on
you
your
do, Zeke.
experience? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I'll tell you that there were a lot of learning lessons in this. When this deal and this opportunity presented itself, we were 7 weeks into short term rentals. So to tell you that my underwriting was perfect and we had all of these things in place, Zeke, we had no idea. And I just saw the opportunity and I was like, I don't know, but we've got to figure this out. So the way it happened was I was connected to the owners of the 9-acre piece of property who were also going to be building cabins. And I was connected to them through Facebook, through a mutual connection that we have here in Indianapolis. And she knows me very well. She's been my esthetician since 2016. So she's seen all of my business evolution. And she was like, just in case, she sent me a text at like 10 o'clock sometime in July of 2023. She was like, just in case you want to go in with both feet, because she knows how I do business. And it was the listing for this like 9-acre piece of property. And the messaging on there was like, come build your vacation rental, or we're selling the whole property to somebody for I think it was, they listed at like 2.1 million at the time, and reach out if you're interested. So what did I do? I DM'd her. I DM'd Valerie and I was like, you don't know who I am, but we have a mutual connection and I really think we need to chat. So I said, I want to know more about your cabins. We had a conversation. We met for lunch. And again, like she and her husband owned the land and then they would be building the cabins as well. And I said, I love that you guys have already parceled this off and we're planning to just sell individual lots and build as you went. Like that was their plan. But when I took the idea to them and I said, I think what we should do is build a whole development of cabins and then also have an event center where we can have weddings, retreats, etc. And they were like, we love that idea. Why don't you guys come down and look at the property? So we did that in August of 2023. Before that, though, I had started talking about this opportunity on Instagram. So I was sharing it in Facebook groups. I was asking about partnerships. I think I was like laughed out of Facebook groups. Zeke, people were like, you just got into this industry. What's your background and experience? And you want to know about partnerships? Who are you? And I was like, watch it happen. Had probably 50 different conversations with people who were interested. But again, I didn't know enough about the underwriting and what it would look like to bring in. I didn't even know GP versus LP. Like I didn't know any of this language. So I found one couple who is my CPA and her husband who went down with us in August to look at the property. Then I found another couple in a mastermind group that we were in who said, we've been looking for something like this to invest in. Let's talk. And they were like, yeah, we have $160,000 to dedicate to this project. Sure, let's do it. So found those two couples. We went down in August to look, and the builder and his wife said, you know what? We want to be an equity partner as well. We'd like to be in for 25%. So we formed an LLC, each of us being equal 25% partners, basically. So there are technically 8 people, but it's 4 couples. So each couple owns 25%. And in kind of the process of putting this together, we decided to build 9 cabins. Well, actually, initially we decided to build 8 individual cabins and then we decided to build a triplex. So we would have basically 11 rentable units that each slept 6. They were all 1 bedroom, 1 bath with a loft. Now, the builder already had the plans for those. So he was kind of like, these are the plans that I'm going to use. But it was his idea to do a triplex. And the reason that we did that, and I'm so glad that we did, he said, I think we have space on this lot up at the front, which is right on the river, to do a big triplex where we could sleep 18 total people, or we could rent them as individual units. Well, Zeke, let me tell you, I wish we would have built like 5 triplex units because it
Really?
is our most rented. Yes. And it's rented first at the highest rates. People love it. And its views are beautiful. It's just so good.
So
So
does it have like
anyway,
lock offs in between so you can open up all 3 units and connect it?
we can't do that. They're connected by a front porch. So you can walk the entire front porch to each unit, but it's like firewalls on the inside, right? So they're separated just by a regular drywall,
Love
basically.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it works really well for families who are like, we want to stay together, but have some separation, like have our own spaces, but all come together. So it works really well for them. So that was, we actually went to the bank, a local bank in Kentucky, and the purchase price that we came up with was 2.3 million. And that was going to include those initial 11 cabins. So 8 structures, plus then also our triplex and our event venue, and then a basketball/pickleball court and a playground. That's what the initial deal was going to be.
And
And
that
so we went
was,
to the bank.
how did that divide up from land to construction in that 2.3?
Yeah, that's a good question, Zeke. And I actually don't have that number. I
That's
should
okay.
have that number, but I don't. I don't. I'm
All right, you
sorry.
got a
I
total.
should, but
So
I
you're
don't.
going in with
Yeah,
2.3
that's my
project.
total.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. Yep. 2.3. Each partner put in 25%. The bank financed 75%. So each partner put in 25% of their 25%,
25%
basically.
of,
Yeah.
so you had to bring
Exactly.
25% equity, and then you divided
Yeah.
that, whatever equity was required,
Yep.
the
Yep.
2.3, probably
Yep.
500,000, divide that by 4. Everybody's got to bring
Exactly.
that to the table.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You're exactly right. The thing that I don't want to say we messed up here, but it was definitely something that I would do differently in a future deal. And I think it was just the way in which the financing worked with this particular bank. But this bank would not include the furnishings or hot tubs or any amenities. It was like, we won't include that. This is we don't know what's going to happen here. So for the first 6, so for the triplex and then 3 additional cabins, all of the partners just put in more capital to do hot tubs and then also all of the design and furnishings work. So that was something I would do differently in a future deal. But we went back to the bank. So we got into this project. We launched the first 3 cabins, and I very quickly started to realize that we were going to need more for guests to do and really make this a resort. We didn't have a game center. We had the pickleball and the basketball, and that was great unless it rains down there. And also, a lot of our guests come for fishing. Again, great unless it rains. Although I've seen people out there fishing in the rain. Not for me, but they're doing it, and that's
It's good
great.
for the fish. They get excited when it
Yeah,
rains.
they're there. So that was fine. But we got into this project, and then at the end of 2024, I said, guys, I think we've got to do something different. We also, before we decided to do this deal, the builders of cabins and owners of the land actually had sold off one of the lots. And that owner of that lot came back to us within like 6 months and said, I don't want this anymore. Actually, I'll just sell it back to you guys. So that's how we got our 12th cabin, because it was only supposed to be 11 at first. And now we got 12. So we went back to the bank about 10 months into this, and we said, hey, we would like to add an additional cabin. We would like to add a game center, and we would like to pave cabin number 1 because it's our accessible cabin. So we've got a ramp that actually goes up into the cabin. We wanted to pave the driveway there. And then we wanted to pave the bottom part of our boat ramp as well. And we would like to ask you for the money to furnish the rest of the cabins that we have to furnish, which now is going to be 6 additional cabins and the hot tubs for all those cabins too. So the bank came out and reappraised the property. It reappraised for $500,000 more than we purchased it for within a year. And then the bank was like, sure, here's this money. All good to go. And
And
so
is this like a
that was great
local
for us.
bank, or was this a?
It is a local bank. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a local bank.
And
Yep.
was it traditional lending, or was it like an SBA lending?
Traditional lending. Yep. Traditional lending. So it's a 30-year traditional mortgage, essentially, is what it is, Zeke.
Nice. We've been
Yeah.
going through with an SBA lender for our hotel, and boy, you
Yeah.
talk about just every little thing is negotiated and pulled out.
Mhm.
It's been the hardest underwriting we've ever done. We built a really cool treehouse goofy project that does amazing before this. And I walked into our local lender. I was like, I got this idea. What do you think? And he's like, well, let me talk to, Joe, and we'll let you know on Friday. And so the difference between working with like the local lenders versus, I've spent a year underwriting with the national SBA is night and day. But we got 15% equity on the hotel versus, I think we needed 25%. Sounds probably similar to what you needed with the conventional. So a little bit more cash down for everybody out there. Go that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine he made those conservative calls, but he was able to just make the call. He didn't have to ask 3 people up what they needed to do. They looked at it and said, okay, they've put this equity in. We have security. We feel comfortable with this, Joe. Yes, and
Yes.
that's a valuable
Yes.
partner to have.
Yeah. 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 Huge. That bank was fantastic. I'm in a boutique hotel mentorship group, and the stories I hear about trying to get financing on these projects. And then I'm like, oh, we just went to one bank, and like, here was the proposal I sent them. And they were like, get out of here. So the local bank was definitely huge in this and being able to get it done in our timeline. And then that brings us kind of to like the development and the construction part of things as well. So the deal was financed, but our builder actually already had a crew, and he was like, listen, I'm going to get to work on this. So he was fronting the cash since August of 2023 until we closed December 31st of 2023, and he had started the build process. So it was really helpful in this regard to be able to have the builder be a partner in the deal as well, because he knew it was all going to work out. And he was like, we just got to go. I've got the crew. We have to make this happen at this point. So we closed on December 31st of 2023. The first 2 cabins were under construction, and they launched in June of 2024. Would have been earlier, but we ran into some Wi-Fi issues, so we had to navigate those waters, and we did. We figured it out, but
You
it
know, like
was a
you put
little
some Starlink out there, or what was the?
so I thought we were going to have to, Zeke, but the situation was, and again, this is a learning lesson in the due diligence process that we did not do. So our builder owns other cabins and has built other cabins down there, and they have fiber internet down there, no big deal. The internet company comes out and installs it, no problem, does that install for free, and then you pay for their service, right? Yeah, well, not if you're a development, we learned, Zeke. They came out and they said, "Oh, you're a development? That'll be $15,000. A splitter cabinet that we need to have and all of these other things." And our builder was like, "Absolutely not. We're not doing that." So he spent 2 days of his time digging trenches to lay the conduit needed for the internet. So we saved some on that. I think we ended up paying maybe 5,000 or 6,000 for the install, but that saved us a chunk. But in that, it took us much longer to launch because we were ready to open in April of 24 for those first two, and we didn't have internet, and I just felt like we couldn't do it, and we were like, maybe we should do Starlink, but then the internet company came through and got our splitter cabinet part we needed, and we were good to go.
Yeah, yeah. So you had I mean, internet's an issue. Like it's got to be done. We're dealing with it, and we have a project in the Dominican Republic right now, and it's like holding up to try to find it. But in all things, it's like solvable through construction. There's nearly always a thing or a couple of things. There's always a couple of things in permitting. You kind of skipped over the permitting phase. Did that go pretty smooth, or did you guys hit things into that?
I skipped over it, Zeke, because I never had to deal with that. Our builder had already done all of that work. So that was really good. I know. Whenever I talk
That's
about
the
this,
advantage of
they're
maybe
like,
you have a
"You're
great
nuts."
builder and a great architect behind you. So that's ideal.
Yes. Yes, it is ideal. It is ideal. Yeah, so that wasn't a big deal. That was not a big deal for us. They did have an issue with it was an inspection on our triplex because the triplex unit, so all of our units down there, and this is where zoning is kind of interesting, but they're all technically single family homes, like they're residential except for our event center, our game center, and our triplex are all commercial buildings. And so there was an issue with something to do with the plumbing, I think, at the triplex that they had to make some changes to, which delayed that launch a little bit. But our builder handled it. My hands didn't have to be on it, and it was fine. We worked through it.
Cool, cool. Well, that's great. Micro resorts are a weird beast. They're not quite hotels. They're not quite camping, and a lot of zoning and municipalities don't know exactly how to handle them, and they have different categories that they put them in. So it sounds like this one, like they even subdivided into little single families, and that's honestly like something that we see quite a bit.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So you had a great team. You had a good architect, obviously, and a good GC to build them. And then it was completely smooth sailing when you guys launched and started renting things out from there, right?
I would imagine you know the answer to that, Zeke. Not necessarily smooth sailing. Again, like they're new construction, so you kind of have to go, all right, what are we going to deal with new construction? And we have built our personal homes, so I knew a little bit about what we might encounter. Honestly, our biggest issue that we had was wildlife. We're in a rural area right next to farmland, and our first few guest days were like, we saw a mouse. No big deal. We're from the country. We get it. But I was like, no big deal. That's a big deal to me. And we manage here in Indianapolis. So if a guest here in one of our indie homes saw a mouse, they would be like, where's my refund? I'm reporting you to Airbnb. I'm getting you kicked off the platform. It would be a whole thing. But our country guests were like, it's fine. No big deal. We're okay. It's fine for us. And I was like, it's not fine. We got to find a permanent solution here. So we have that under control now, which is good. But that was, I guess, maybe a little bit of a surprise or just something that I hadn't had to deal with yet. So we dealt with that. We actually flooded our first cabin, and that was totally on us during our install. We thought that the washer drain was connected. It was not connected. And we were upstairs assembling in the loft, and we came downstairs, and there's water out into our kitchen, in the primary bedroom, all over the bathroom. That wasn't great, but we got that cleaned up and it was okay. So yeah, learning lessons.
There's all those like priming the new construction. You got to work it through its kinks a little bit. I laugh like we renovated this house and it was the same. We came from Texas. We didn't realize when it gets cold, no matter how tight you make that house, those mice are cold and they're looking for a way to get somewhere warm. And they are like little Houdinis that will teleport through walls and find a way into a warm spot. So, it happens and you just got to find it out. So
Yeah. Yeah, that is true.
that's great. Well, what is next on the Weber Co forecast? What are you guys working on next?
Yeah, an awesome question, Zeke. So, personally, we are planning to do RV life this year. So, we're going to leave in June of this year to pursue a different adventure, I would say, for a period of time at least. We're going to do this for a year, and our boys are right now they're 2 and 4. They'll be 3 and 5 when we start this venture. But for us, we've realized over the last few years, we've put in a lot of hours and we've put in a lot of work and have been very focused on building our businesses. And not that we're not going to continue that, but we're going to do it in a different way than what we have been. So my husband will be leaving his nice, safe, stable W-2, which will be interesting for him. And we're going to go on the road for a year and see as many national parks as we can and just give our boys a different experience. So we're excited for that personally. The Weber Co. will continue to grow this year and supporting branding and marketing hospitality from that perspective. It's my goal this year that we are your number one company from a branding and marketing perspective. So I'm like, that's kind of my North Star. And there's a couple of projects that I'm looking at right now for the boutique hotel micro resort side of things that I've been offered some partnership opportunities in. So I'm kind of exploring what that might look like, where I can bring in my branding expertise and do that maybe a little bit in exchange for equity. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see. I'm kind of open to what opportunities come our way. The cabins are now done, which is very exciting. And last night we just got our first email from our first bride who was like, I'm ready to book. Let's book our wedding. And I'm like, this is great. So I feel like we're just at the start of that too, especially since we just started marketing weddings literally 30 days ago, which is awesome.
Oh, super cool. Well, we're working on a new boutique hotel and spa next to Rocky Mountain National Park. So put that on your stop when you guys are touring around in your van. Come check it out.
Yes. Yes, we will. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's super fun. I'm trying to convince my wife. I've got on our vision board an adventure van, like fully branded Radical Hospitality, but she's not quite
100%.
ready to jump on that bus. It's like, Zeke, you're
That's
kind
fair.
of.
It'll be a big change.
I don't know if I want to be in that close of a space with you. Fun. Well, a couple of things. I'm working on a similar project that's got a wedding venue. Started out as a wedding venue. Guy decided he's more like, hey, I'd like this to be more of a man's lodge, hunting venue. Family can come and stay and do their family retreats, that kind of thing. And so I'm trying to figure out how to program the venue. So I'm interested on your venue and what you guys ended up designing, what's worked, what hasn't, what's in it, how big, how many people can you host in the venue? Would you've done more or less? All that.
I would have done the venue differently, Zeke, for sure. Here, I'll tell you what we have and I'll tell you what I would have done differently. So, essentially, what we have is a 30 by 60 concrete slab that half of it on the inside does look very similar to a cabin. It has a full kitchen. We have a large dining table for 10. We have a seating area with a large TV, and then we have 3 cocktail tables that seat 2 each. So, inside there, we can seat 16 people at tables, and then you could put an additional 3 on a couch and 2 in chairs that we've got there. But the advantage is that there's a full kitchen. So we've been asked by people in church groups, especially, who are like, we want to come in and bring our own food. Is there a spot where we can all cook together? And I'm like, we do have that, which is really great. So if you're building an event venue, I would make sure that you have a spot that everyone, if you're thinking about family reunions or church retreats, any groups like that, even the brides that were being reached out to. We had a bride the other day inquire, and she said, I just want to have a wedding without all the formalities, and we just want to be together. And I'm like, well, our space is perfect for that. That's really what it's designed for. So that's kind of the inside. Outside, and the space is split evenly in half. So outside, it is covered, and underneath there, we have really beautiful tables that seat 6 each, and we have 9 total tables. So we seat 54 outside, and then we also have 2 bar carts in that area as well. We do have some outdoor grills, which is a nice feature to be able, again, just like for everybody to cook in one spot, do the family barbecue or whatever you choose to do. This venue is also very close to, it's right next to our pickleball / basketball court, our playground, and our game center. So all of our amenities area is in one spot, which I also really love. And that was a good call on our builder's part, because I didn't want it to be that way. And I had a different idea or a different vision in mind. And he was like, no, all of the amenities spaces need to be in one spot, Steph. And I was like, all right, I'll trust you on this. And I'm really glad I did. So that's what it looks like in terms of how I would do things differently. we've had a few church groups, and actually that's been the largest group of people to reach out to us about hosting their event at Cabins on the Cumberland. And what we've heard is, I wish you guys had like a bigger, not outdoor, but a bigger space that was all inside where we could worship, where we could gather. It was like more of a flex space. We don't have a super large indoor space where everyone can come together and gather, so to speak. So I think that's something that I would maybe change moving forward, is just a more flexible venue. But again, Zeke, we didn't build this with the intention in mind of saying like, we're going to be a venue. We built it with we're going to be vacation rentals and have a
Yeah.
venue spot. So I
Yeah.
think you kind of have to make decisions on what that looks like too. But our messaging is landing because the brides, I mean, like I said, we started promoting weddings about 30 days ago. And in that amount of time, we've had 8 inquiries already. And that is actually like, that may not sound like a lot, but it is actually really good. But the brides who have inquired are saying, we don't want the formalities. We want a really casual, relaxed weekend. We want to have a small ceremony and then just be able to make dinner together. We want to bring all of our friends and family to one place. So they're using language that we have on our site, and we're serving that need. And that works really well for us. And that's okay. Like, we know that that's kind of the target and the audience. So that works. But that would be maybe one change that I would make. I also think I would have thought a little bit harder about how large that event space needed to be. If we could seat 100 people in our covered area, that would be great, because we can sleep up to 72 total guests. So technically, we can seat 70 in that venue, and you could add a couple chairs if need be. So we could technically do that, but it would be tight in terms of where do you serve food and just some of those other logistics. So it can work. And we've actually already had a church group who came and stayed, and they had 65. They loved it. They had the best experience. They're coming back next year. So it works for what we have and what we're attracting.
Do you think that balance between ability to sleep everybody versus how many you can host is important? Or do you think, like, hey, the event majority you're driving in, driving out, therefore it should be bigger than what I can sleep? Or do you think those need to be closer in balance?
For us, so for our weddings, for example, we've positioned it as we do wedding retreats, 3-day wedding retreats. So if you want to host your wedding with us, you have to stay for 3 days,
Mm.
and we
Do a
cannot
full book
host
out?
over. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a full property buyout. So we're not renting just our venue to someone who wants to come in and have their wedding for a day. It's a wedding retreat, and that's what it is. So and that was a strategic decision that we made, because we didn't feel good about trying to have guests who are on vacation while someone's hosting their wedding and also using our game center. Like, those logistics just were not going to make sense for us. So I think for us, because of that, it would be great if we could just have that outdoor space where we had 100, because what we say is, on your wedding day, if you want to have up to 100 people, great. We can only have 72 overnight guests, because that's our maximum capacity for who can sleep inside the cabins, right? So I think it would be awesome if we could seat 100 out there, but that's not the case. So the pickleball court can be used as our
Expand
like
that into it.
optional
Yeah.
overflow. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And the venue, 30 by 60, so like 1,800 square foot, that's seems reasonable. And the cost to build that is probably still like a reasonable cost. We've done easily, like, for 100, 200 guests, $1 million venues. And it's like really easy to spend. And then, like, you got to be doing a lot of weddings to pay for that.
Yes, you do.
But if you could have a revenue based cabin business, and you can get, a handful of buyouts for, the cost of an 1,800 square foot venue, whatever that ended up being, that is probably a great ROI and add on. And so it's not always going after the biggest, groups is not bad. What do
Right,
you
right.
guys, what would you guess is like a buyout, the venue and wedding? Roughly, what do you guys
Yeah.
charge to do that?
Yep. So for our weddings, the way that we've kind of done this is based on seasonality. Obviously, summer and fall are going to be our big season for weddings. So our 3-day wedding weekend experience in our summer and fall seasons starts at 18,000 for those 3 days, and that includes everything: full cabins, the use of the event center, the game center, obviously private property access, etc. So that's our starting point for our peak season for weekends. And that's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then they check out on Sunday. So we've been a little bit strategic there. And then you also can do a 3-day weekday situation, and that's 15,000 for peak season. So that's kind of where we've started it, or starting at. The lake The lake has some really big events that happen. So we have to be mindful in saying, like, hey, these are starting at price points, not every weekend, because if there's a big weekend on the lake, our rates on our cabins jump significantly. So we have to be mindful of all of those pieces too.
That's awesome. And that's a really good, price point. Plus, you're getting stay. I mean, that's a great value, and you're close to a lake. I think that hits a lot of people who like don't want to go broke when they're young and eloping, or young and getting married and starting out. So
Yes.
it's not cheap, but it's not like unattainable
Yeah.
for most weddings coming in. So
Yeah.
and you'll
No, it's
fill
not.
that up. It should be
Yes.
really really
Yes.
fun.
Yes. Yes. We've got some bridal shows coming up. So I'm excited to see the response on those.
Nice, nice. Well, what other? So we talked about the wedding venue piece of it. There's another thing I really wanted to hit that we're working on that be close to you. Did the branding. Yeah, what else have we not talked about that you are working on that you'd like to share with our audience? That anything that we missed in the conversation here?
I don't think so, Zeke. I mean, I think biggest thing, if you're listening to this podcast and you are building short-term rentals or you are building boutique hotels or micro resorts, I don't care if you use the Weber Co, but please have a branding and marketing strategy in some capacity. Please do not neglect it. And really, like, don't underestimate the power of really strong content, building your email list, building your SMS list, running ads, having an integrated approach. We didn't go into the marketing side as much during our conversation today, but it's not just about one piece of the puzzle, especially for boutique hotels and micro resorts. I mean, this comes down to, even I talked on my stories the other day about wearing your brand and getting your brand in front of people, or giving your guests the opportunity to buy a t-shirt from you or buy a hat, because they become your walking billboard, and like even that can be a piece of marketing, right? So don't just say, we have to have an Instagram account and create some content. It's like, no, make sure that you have your Instagram, yes, but if you're driving traffic back to your website, make sure you've got an email opt-in so that you can collect guests information who are, or potential guests who are landing on your website. So don't neglect the power of marketing and owning your brand. It's very easy in this industry, I found, Zeke, for investors to say, I'll just list it on Airbnb and in 48 hours I'm going to have $10,000 or more of bookings. And I'm like, yeah, but also you're going to pay a 15.5% host service fee on those, and Airbnb owns the relationship.
Yeah.
So
And what happens
anyway.
when they decide to shut down and pandemic hits? It's like no one can come stay, right? So it's like giving the keys to your business to somebody else, or do you want to own
Mhm.
your keys? So I think it's tremendously valuable and a key stool of business. So thanks for what you do, Steph. It was a pleasure having you on Radical Hospitality, and I wish you all the best with your travels, with your new micro resort, and the branding that you're doing for all of us small businesses out there is invaluable. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out, Steph?
Yeah, definitely come hang out on Instagram. That's where I am the most. So that's the Weber Co. And Weber's just with one B. So the Weber Co. on Instagram, and send me a DM. Let me know that you listened to Zeke's podcast and that you heard this episode. And I'd love to connect and follow along with your journey as well.
Love it. And that's a wrap. We'll see you guys next time.